70-740 Lesson 5, Implementing Data Deduplication. What is data deduplication? Well, it's removing duplicate data. Data deduplication was first introduced with Windows Server 2012. And what it does is it allows us to reduce disk space utilized by removing duplicate data, and this preserves storage capacity. Data deduplication breaks data into small chunks, identifies the duplicates, and maintains a single copy of each chunk. Data deduplication is ideal for general shared folders, such as public and home folders, offline folders, images, software deployment shares, and VHD libraries that store VHD, that's virtual hard disk, files. So think of it this way. We create a group policy that redirects all of our users' public and home folders, such as documents, pictures, etc., to a network share, because we've got resiliency built in with a RAID 5 or a RAID 6 or a RAID 10, whatever it may be. We've got high availability on a file server, so we redirect the user's files to be stored there. As far as users know, they're stored on their computer, but it's actually a pointer to a location on a file server. And then we enable data deduplication on that file server, on that storage location. Let's say our company has 1,000 users. We're a fairly good sized company. And each week, managers, maybe the C-level employees, sales personnel, they send out newsletters, they send out updates, they send out documents. And these documents may be addressed to all the users. They may be addressed to a portion of the users, let's say only to the managers group, or to administration, or to IT, or to sales, or to research, whatever it may be. Well, many times there will be attachments. There'll be a document attached, a spreadsheet attached, data. Well, we're sending that same piece of data to many users. And they go, well, this is important. I need to save this, so I save it to my documents folder. So we may end up with many duplicate copies of the same document, spreadsheet, data file, whatever it may be. Data deduplication takes that and says, we're going to index this one copy. And then instead of storing 100 or 500 copies of it in each one of these other folders, we're just going to put a pointer there, so that if that user ever wants to retrieve it, we'll give them a copy of this one folder, that one single copy of the chunk. That's what data deduplication is, and it can save you a drastic amount of storage. As a server administrator, you're going to deal with huge repositories of data. Companies create massive amounts of data. And these days, because data's gotten so cheap, we store it all. And it may be because of regulatory compliance, the company may have to store it. May have to store it for many years. And even after it's not online and easily available, it may need to be archived. Planning. When we plan our server storage, we need to plan it to be scalable and optimized for that data. Let's take a look at what some of the things data deduplication can bring to the table for us. Capacity optimization. It gives you the ability to store more data in less physical space. It can, look at this, it can deliver at least a 2-to-1 optimization ratio for general file servers and up to 20-to-1 for virtualization data. Scale and performance. It's highly scalable. Reliability, data integrity, optimizing over the site links, supporting very large volumes and file sizes. Data deduplication can support volume sizes up to 64 terabytes and individual file sizes up to 1 terabyte. It can be multi-threaded as far as the processing pipeline, and it can utilize multiple CPUs per volume. And so by being able to have those multi-threads, we can increase the optimization throughput of that data deduplication process. And it can also support nano servers and failover clustering. You say, well, but what will it really do? Let's take a look at a live example. Here is a remote desktop to a server in a live environment. And this server has a number of disks provisioned. You can see there's a C, an E, an F, and an H. Only one of these drives has data deduplication enabled, right here. The data deduplication rate is 60%. They are saving over 1.26 terabytes of storage by utilizing data deduplication. And this is all being utilized for device backups. Now you say, well, there's 1.26 terabytes saved, and that's 60%. Well, do the math. Well, that's not that many backups. Well, let's scale that up to our example of 1,000 users. In that 1,000 user environment, we're going to have many, many backups that we're going to be doing. Let's take this example and multiply it times 10 or times 20. We could be saving 12, 24, 30 terabytes of storage. That's a lot of storage that you're saving. This is the benefit of data deduplication. Let's go back to our textbook. Now, we need to determine what are the appropriate uses for data deduplication, because it's not right for every scenario. It can be used for almost any scenario where you want to reduce disk space usage. So if you've got user documents, those deployment shares, virtualization libraries, general file shares, this is where we use it. For user documents, where we can save 30 to 50% of our storage space for user documents. On a software deployment share, we can save 70 to 80% of our space. In a virtualization library, even more, 80 to 95% of your system storage space can be saved. And even just as a general file share where you're mixing everything up, you can expect to see at least a 50% saving. And right there in that previous example of the live server, we saw a 60% savings in storage. Now, initially, I gave you an example of 1,000 users and all their desktop, where their documents and where their pictures, all their user folders were being redirected. Well, right here, folder redirection servers in user home folders. This is an ideal candidate. Here you can see those other ones. So how do we go about implementing that? Well, first we have to install the data deduplication role. It's a role. Then we configure each volume that we want to have data deduplication run on. It's got a couple different components. It's got a filter driver. It monitors those local and remote IOs, and it handles the chunks of data on the file system by interacting on the different jobs. Each volume gets one filter driver. We've got a data deduplication service, and it manages the optimization by managing those multiple jobs that perform the deduplication and the compression of files. It does what's called garbage collection. It's removing data chunks. It can remove data chunks that are no longer being referenced. And it does scrubbing the volume by checking and maintaining data integrity. Also, deduplication keeps backup copies of popular chunks if they're referenced over 100 times. There's also unoptimization. It undoes deduplication on all the optimized files in a volume. Say you're going to decommission a server with volumes enabled for deduplication. Well, you do that first. Now, when we enact this in our lab, we're not going to see any benefit. We're working in a lab environment and we don't have huge volumes of files to be data deduplicated. But additionally, any file that's written to an area to a volume that's flagged for deduplication, it does not attempt to deduplicate a file until after 3 days. So we would have to wait. If we initiated this, we would have to write a whole bunch of data to the volume that we're going to enable data deduplication on. And then we would have to come back 3 days later to see that. You can implement on only non-removable NTFS or REFS drives. And you can't do it on a system or a boot volume or on a cluster share volume. And be aware that any files smaller than 32 kilobytes or those that are encrypted aren't processed. So if you're encrypting all your data, do not enact data deduplication on that volume because it's not going to do anything. If there's encryption involved, forget about the data deduplication. So how do we go about it? Well, we do the add roles and features. On roles, we expand our file and storage services and we select data deduplication. We select our volume and then we right click on that and we configure the data deduplication. Let's take a look at that. For example, here, if I go to configure data deduplication, here it is. You specify what type of data is going to be on it. Now you can change that 3-day period to a shorter period, but you only want to do it on data that's static. You wouldn't want to be doing this on data that's brand new. You can specify specific folders and any files contained in them to be excluded from that data deduplication. And then you can also set a specific schedule as to when it's going to run. It runs in the background just like all of the rest of our services. So we can enable throughput optimization. We can do a second schedule. We can have multiple schedules. For the most part, you can just let it run. This is how we configure our data deduplication. Let's take a look at the properties, see what the properties view of that enabled volume shows. Here it also shows that savings. Same view as what we see on our line there. Okay, back to our textbook. We can monitor it. We can use a Windows PowerShell commandlet, a measure -dedupe file metadata commandlet, and this determines the amount of data that can be reclaimed using deduplication. We can use that. We can use the ddpeval.exe command line tool to estimate capacity savings. Everything we do goes back to planning. So even with enabling data deduplication, you need to plan what you want to do. Would it be of any benefit to enable data deduplication on an encrypted drive? No. We need to evaluate. We need to plan. You'll hear me say this time after time on all the different things that we do in our network administration and in our systems administration. Now, we looked at the fact that we can change our optimization schedule. We can monitor it on our environment by using the get dedupe status, get dedupe volume. Let's see if we can see any of that. Let's take a look back on that server. And we're going to go to PowerShell. There it is. We're going to right click on that. And we'll run as administrator just to make sure. And let's do a get dedupe volume. I'm going to use tab complete. Well, right there we can see Enabled, true, volume is F. Let's do this. Get dash help space get dash dedupe status. Let's see how we have to run that. Well, that doesn't really tell us much, does it? Well, if we do that same command with a dash D for detailed, it gives us a little bit more information. You see this dash volume? So let's do that. Get dedupe status dash V for volume F. Oh, didn't like that. Maybe we have to do a F colon. There we are. There we can see the specific data for that. We can see the number of optimized files in addition to the savings. So what about get dedupe job? Doesn't show us anything, right? Get dedupe job shows any currently running or queued deduplication jobs. Well, because there was none, nothing appears. We can also do update dedupe status and these other ones as well. Now, using data deduplication, this allows us to do our backups and our restore operations faster, because what we're doing is we're performing a block-based backup because we've got less data to back up. If we've optimized our data and have removed 60% of the duplication, we only have to back up 40% of the data instead of 100% of the data. If we were doing file-based back operations, we wouldn't benefit from it because we would copy the files in their original format. So understand these different backup and restore scenarios that are supported with data deduplication. Understand the ones that are not. This is a very short chapter, one of the shortest chapters in our lessons, but we introduced data deduplication and the fact that it first became available to us with Windows Server 2012. And it reduces disk space by removing duplicate data. And there's many different types of uses or different roles we can implement it in, such as general shared folders, folder redirection of user public and home folders, offline folders, images, and so on. We can use it in almost any situation where you want to reduce disk space. But remember, you can't use it if you've got encryption. It won't do you any good. You have to install the role service. And then after the role service is installed, you have to select the specific volume or volumes that you want to enable data deduplication on. And then after you enable it, you want to monitor and maintain those systems. You want to make sure that they have optimum performance. And as a benefit to data deduplication, our backups are smaller and can be performed faster. And inversely, any restore operations of those backups will occur faster. Thank you for reviewing 70-740 Lesson 5.